the secret of becoming good and then better and then best at something? Yes, the secret is practice, and then more practice. Not till you get it right, but till you cannot get it wrong. So always remember, revision is the key to remembering and to success. So with that, we start with the anatomy of the pharyngeal wall. Now, what we have seen in the previous module is that the pharynx is actually a connecting tube. It is made of muscles and fascia. So we call it as a musculofacial tube. It is actually a muscular tube which is bounded anteriorly and posteriorly by fascia. So we call it as a musculofacial tube, connecting the nose with the larynx and with the connecting the oral cavity with the esophagus. So the connecting channel is the pharynx. So what we saw till now is that yes, this is a musculofacial tube, and here it appears cylindrical. It is not actually cylindrical. It is like an inverted cone. It is like an inverted cone, which means that the broadest is the nasopharynx and the narrowest will be the hypopharynx or the laryngopharynx. So yes, behind the nasal cavity, behind the oral cavity and behind the larynx, this acts as a connecting tube connecting the nose to the larynx and the oral cavity to the esophagus. So this is when we take a sagittal cut section, how the pharynx appears. So the uppermost part of the pharynx is what we call as the nasopharynx because it lies behind the nasal cavity. The below that is the oropharynx because it lies behind the oral cavity, and below that is the laryngopharynx because it lies behind the larynx, right? And we know the boundaries. Nasopharynx is from the base of skull to, quickly you will tell me this, yes, to the palate. Oropharynx is from the palate to, from the hard palate, yes, the 2H, hard palate to hyoid, to the hyoid, and the hypopharynx is from the hyoid to the lower border of cricoid. Now in this module, what we are going to do is the pharyngeal wall. So if this here is the pharyngeal tube, the musculofacial tube, so here this what we are seeing is the pharyngeal wall. Inside is the cavity and outside are the spaces around the pharynx. So what we are going to do here is the layers of the pharyngeal wall. Yes, this pharyngeal wall that is appearing very thin to us is actually in 5 layers, right? So just the part that is visible to us from the nasal cavity, from the oral cavity, that part is the epithelium, right? We know that everything is lined by the epithelium, right? That is the first layer. Then we have the fascia lining the muscle layers anteriorly. Anteriorly we have the fascia which lines the muscle layer. So this is the fascia. And then we have 2 layers of the muscles of the pharynx. So the muscles of the pharynx are arranged in 2 layers. So we have 2 layers of the muscles of the pharynx, and then we have another fascia which binds the muscle layer posteriorly, right? So which means that the pharynx is actually a muscular tube which is bounded anteriorly and posteriorly by fascia, and lining them, which faces the oral cavity or the nasal cavity, definitely there will be the epithelial lining. So that is the wall of the pharynx. So we will do the layers of the pharyngeal wall in sequence, and we will see what the clinical significance of these layers is. So I hope you have understood what the layers that I am talking about and how actually it is oriented. So coming to the first layer. So in the layers, we have the first layer. The first layer is the epithelial lining. Epithelial lining. Yes, now the epithelium all over in the pharynx is the stratified squamous epithelium except for the nasopharynx. In the nasopharynx, the lining epithelium is the same as the nasal cavity. So you will tell me nasal cavity, I will tell you nasopharynx. So yes, nasal cavity is lined by, yes, it is ciliated columnar pseudostratified. So in the nasopharynx, the lining epithelium is, in the nasopharynx, it is ciliated columnar. When I say ciliated columnar, it is understood ciliated columnar pseudostratified. Rest everywhere it is lined by stratified squamous. And when I say stratified squamous, what do you understand by that? Is the stratified squamous keratinized or non-keratinized? Obviously, it has to be non-keratinized, right? Wherever it is inside, it is non-keratinized except for the junctional areas, like the areas in the nose where it is going inside, that is the vestibule, that is keratinized. Same in the ear where in the cartilaginous part of the external aortic canal, that is keratinized. Rest everywhere. Inside, whenever we are talking about stratified squamous epithelium, it is non-keratinized. So rest everywhere. Rest everywhere. It is lined by stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium. Right. Now, what's the significance of knowing this, and how is this asked in your exam? Yes, how it is asked in your exam is any structure which is in the nasopharynx is given to you and it is asked it is lined by which epithelium. For example, adenoids. Now, even if you do not know now where adenoids are, I am just telling you that adenoids are present in the nasopharynx. Tell me what will be the lining epithelium of the adenoid. Yes, ciliated columnar. Very good. Tonsils. Tonsils, you know it is present where? Is it present in nasopharynx, oropharynx or hypopharynx? Yes, it is in the oropharynx. So, tell me the lining epithelium. Yes, stratified squamous. Yes. Tell me the lining epithelium of soft palate now. Soft palate? Soft palate? Yes, soft palate has two surfaces. Yes, that is why they confuse you. Soft palate has two surfaces. The nasopharyngeal is by the ciliated columnar, whereas the oropharyngeal surface is lined by stratified squamous epithelium. So, it is lined by both by ciliated columnar as well as by stratified squamous epithelium. Is that clear? So, that was the first layer and that is the lining epithelium. Now, below the lining epithelium, what do we have? Yes, we have a collection of subepithelial lymphoid tissue. So, let us first see this and understand, and then we will see how we can draw it. So, this is exactly how it looks. We know that this is the pharyngeal tube. So, this is the lining epithelium. Yes, if this is the nasopharynx, can you tell me what this lining epithelium is? Yes, this will be the ciliated columnar. In the oropharynx, it will be stratified squamous. Okay, so now let me dissect out the epithelial lining, right? So, I am dissecting out the epithelial lining. I have removed the epithelial lining. I have dissected it out. So, can you see some pink? Yes, collection of lymphoid tissue here. So, these are, I will just open the pharyngeal wall so that you can see it. I will straighten it instead of being a tube. I will straighten it so that you can have a better look here. So, yes, we have subepithelially collection of lymphoid tissue in certain areas. Yes. So, this collection of lymphoid tissue that is in the nasopharynx, that is present in the center, this is the adenoid. Laterally, in the nasopharynx, we have the opening of the eustachian tube. So, behind the eustachian tubes, we have another lymphoid tissue. They are known as the tubal tonsils. Coming more laterally, in the oropharynx, this is something that you always see, right? In the oropharynx, there is a tube like this. So, in the oropharynx, laterally, open anybody's mouth and you will be able to see. Yes, laterally we see this collection of lymphoid tissue. They are what are known as the palatine tonsil. They are also known as the fascial tonsils, right? So, these are the collection of lymphoid tissues which are present in the nasopharynx and the oropharynx, and they are present in the form of a ring, and this ring is what is known as Waldeyer's ring. Now, before we see what the components of the Waldeyer's ring are, why at all are this lymphoid tissue present in the nasopharynx and the oropharynx? Yes, these act as guards. Yes, this is present at the site of entry of the antigens. We know that whenever we breathe, all the time we are breathing and the air is going from the nose and then it is going down. So, these lymphoid tissues are present at the entry site of the air so that it can detect any antigens and it can elicit an immune response. It can also elicit immunological memory. So, this is for immunity. This is very important. These lymphoid tissues are important for immunity in the child. Now, also, these are in the oropharynx, we have the tonsils, right? So, why are they present in the oropharynx? Again, as guards. Yes, oropharynx is the area from where we always eat. So, whenever there in the food, there are antigens, whichever we are eating. So, these are coming in contact with this lymphoid tissue and they are eliciting a immune response. So, they are developing, the child is developing immunity. So, these are very important in a child for development of immunity. These are acting as guards sitting at the site of entry of air, site of entry of food. But what is pathological here is that if any child is exposed repeatedly to antigens or if any child is allergic to something, then these lymphoid tissues can hypertrophy. So their size becomes much more, and we know that this area of the pharynx, this tube, is not a very wide area. Yes, so when they enlarge, they create obstruction, they create multiple problems, and that is why it is very, very commonly asked that what are the components of the Waldear's ring. So what are the components of the Waldear's ring? Let us quickly see. So what is Waldear's ring is, they are collection of subepithelial lymphoid tissue. There they are subepithelial. Subepithelial. So in the nasopharynx, we have the collection of lymphoid tissue in the midline. As I just showed you, it was present in the midline. So that is known as adenoids. This is in the nasopharynx. Now coming more laterally behind the eustachian tube opening. Now when we did here, we saw that the eustachian tube connects the middle ear to the pharynx. Yes. So yes, it connects the middle ear to which part of the pharynx? To the nasopharynx. So yes, where the eustachian tube opens, behind that we have collection of lymphoid tissue. They are known as tubal tonsils. The tubal tonsils are also known as Gerlach tonsils. Gerlach tonsils. The adenoids are also known as Luschka's tonsils. Luschka's tonsils. Now coming more laterally, we have the palatine tonsils that are present in the oropharynx in between the two pillars. They are known as palatine. Also, they are known as the fascial tonsils. Fascial tonsils. And starting from the midline, coming back to the midline in the base of tongue, we have the lingual tonsils. And in the posterior pharyngeal wall, we have bands and nodules, as we are seeing here, the bands and nodules. Yes. So what we are seeing is that all this lymphoid tissue is present at the entry sites of air and food, and it is in the form of a ring which is known as Waldear's ring. And all the components of the Waldear's ring have a tonsil in their name. Yes, we have the tubal tonsils, we have the palatine tonsils, we have the lingual tonsils, except for one, the adenoids. The adenoids does not have a tonsil in their name. So that is why another name for adenoids is nasopharyngeal tonsil. And yes, it is asked in your exam, nasopharyngeal tonsil is another name for. So yes, it is another name for adenoids. It is also known as nasopharyngeal tonsil. So now you will quickly tell me, Luschka's or nasopharyngeal tonsil is another name for? Yes, tell me this. You will have to tell me. Yes, adenoids. Gerlach tonsil is another name for? Another name for? Tubal tonsils. Tubal tonsils. Palatine or fascial tonsil is the tonsil that we see. It is in the oropharynx. Yes, that is. It is known as palatine tonsil, or it is known as fascial tonsils, or just we call it as tonsils. Whenever we say tonsils, that is what we mean by tonsils, the palatine or the fascial tonsils. And lingual tonsils is, again, this is in the oropharynx, in the base of tongue, and we have the lateral bands and nodules. Now let us quickly see how they actually look like. And yes, these pictures are given to us, and we are expected to identify what these are. So yes, we have gone through the nasal cavity, and that is endoscopically. I told you that if we want to see the structures of nasopharynx, how do we see it? Yes, either by posterior rhinoscopy, through the oral cavity, through the oropharynx behind the uvula, or we can see it very, very beautifully endoscopically through the nose. So yes, we have gone endoscopically through one nostril, and we are in the nasopharynx. So what are we seeing? Yes, this what we are seeing is the adenoid. So yes, what is this? This is adenoid. Now can you tell me the lining epithelium? Lining epithelium of adenoid? Yes, it is ciliated columnar. Ciliated columnar. Okay, just see here. Can you see that these are appearing multiple, and we call them adenoids also, like adenoids. So are there multiple adenoids? That is why it is known as S adenoids. Yes, it is a single adenoid. Then why do we call it multiple, and why is it appearing multiple? Yes, can you see here? It is appearing so many here. Yes, it is a single adenoid, but it appears multiple because it has multiple vertical ridges, dividing the single mass into multiple small different appearing masses. So it is not multiple. It is not multiple. It is single, but it has vertical ridges. It has vertical ridges. And as we can see here, it is so huge. I told you that this is for normal immunological function, but anything when it becomes excess is bad. Yes. So when it hypertrophies, can you see it is completely blocking the nasopharynx. It is completely blocking the nasal airway. So that will lead to multiple problems. What problems? That we'll see in detail as a separate section of adenoid. But yes, this is how the adenoids appear, and that is what the function is, and that is what the abnormality can be. So here, can you identify this? Yes, this you cannot mistake. This is what is the palatine or the fascial tonsil, and this is the palatine tonsil. Can you tell me the lining epithelium? Very good. It is stratified squamous. Stratified squamous. And can you see here that they are multiple appearing like holes? Yes, multiple. See anybody's tonsil, open your mouth and you can see in yourself also. Or in children, the tonsils are huge. So in them, you can see very beautifully that you will see that you can see multiple depressions on the tonsil. What are these? Yes, the epithelial lining dips inside the tonsillar tissue. So here we have the tonsil. We have the tonsil here, and the tonsil epithelium is not straight. It dips inside the tonsillar tissue, and these are what are known as crypts. Yes, so do we have crypts in the adenoid also? No, in the adenoid we have vertical ridges, whereas crypts are present in the tonsil. They are known as crypts. Now here, what are you seeing here in this picture? Yes, what is this? What is this? This is the circumvallar papillae. Quickly tell me the nerve supply. Yes, that is a glossopharyngeal nerve, but anyway, we do not want to see that. What we are seeing here is a lingual tonsil. Can you note this behind that? Yes, let us have a closer look. Yes, can you see this? This is what is the lingual tonsils, and many of the times patients come to us with a complaint that they have developed cancer in the mouth. Yes, why? Because maybe they have had something through which they are allergic to, and these lingual tonsils have got hypertrophied, and they are feeling some abnormal sensation in their throat, and they have by chance noticed that there is some abnormal swelling there, and they get so scared, and they do not believe that that is something that is normal and which has got hypertrophied, and they still, yes, they will just go on googling, and they want us to just exclude whether it is a cancer or not. So yes, if anybody comes to you with this complaint, you know what is this? Is this cancer? No, this is how the lingual tonsils appear like. Can you tell me the lining epithelium of this? Yes, this will be the stratified squamous. And can you identify what this is? Yes, these are the nodules in the posterior pharyngeal wall, and these are the nodules which we usually see whenever we see pharyngitis, whenever we see patients of pharyngitis. Whenever we depress the tongue, what we see are these congested nodules in the posterior pharyngeal wall. So these are nodules in the posterior pharyngeal wall, nodules in posterior pharyngeal wall, and the lining epithelium we know, yes, it is stratified squamous. And the lining epithelium of soft palate is superiorly by the ciliated columnar, whereas the oropharyngeal surface is lined by stratified squamous. Now, these components of the Walde's ring, they drain into lymph nodes. Yes. Where are these lymph nodes present? Yes, they are present in the neck here. We have so many lymph nodes in the neck. And also from the nasopharynx, the lymphatic drainage goes to the lymph nodes which is present behind the pharyngeal wall. That is known as the retropharyngeal lymph nodes. So, it goes into the retropharyngeal lymph nodes, it goes into the neck nodes, and these are sometimes known as external Walde's ring, right? So, the Walde's ring, sometimes you are asked that what is internal Walde's ring, what is external Walde's ring. So, then you must know that what is external Walde's ring is where the internal Walde's ring drains, and these are comprised of the neck nodes and also of the retropharyngeal lymph nodes. Now, always remember that if in the question is just mentioned Walde's ring, it is not given internal or external, then what it is taken to be granted. For granted, you have to take it that what is being asked is the internal Walde's ring. Whenever it is asked just what are the components of Walde's ring, it is understood what is asked is internal Walde's ring. So what is asked is the subepithelial group of lymph nodes. Yes, they are mucosa associated. Sometimes it is asked, what are the mucosa associated lymphoid tissue of the pharynx? So it means the Walde's ring. Yes, they are present subepithelially just below the mucosal layer. So they are known as they are a component of malt. We have malt many other places in the body. So yes, this is also component of the malt. Whereas the external Walde's ring, they are not a component of malt. They are not mucosa associated. They are present in the neck here. They are present behind the pharyngeal wall. Right? Okay, so now quickly tell me, the Walde's ring is present in the nasopharynx, oropharynx, hypopharynx, nasopharynx and hypopharynx. Where? Yes, nasopharynx and oropharynx. Okay, what are the components of Walde's ring in the nasopharynx? In the nasopharynx, yes? Yes, adenoids and tubal tonsils. What are the components of Walde's ring in the oropharynx? Palatine tonsils, lingual tonsils and nodules in the posterior pharyngeal wall. In the hypopharynx also do we have? No, we do not have in the hypopharynx. So yes, in the nasopharynx, nasopharynx is also known as epipharynx. It lies above the oropharynx. So it is epipharynx. So here we have the component of Walde's ring. We have the adenoids, and we have the tubal tonsils. And yes, very commonly is asked, adenoid is lined by which epithelium? So that is the ciliated columnar epithelium. The additional names you already know. Now you are going to tell me, we are not going to write it down, we have written it down earlier. Quickly tell me, what are the names of adenoids? Yes, very good. Nasopharyngeal tonsil, very good. Which other? Yes, it is known as Luschka's tonsil. And what is the name of tubal tonsil? Tubal tonsil is known as Gerlach tonsils. Yes, in the oropharynx, the Walde's ring is, yes, the palatine tonsil, the lingual tonsil. Yes, the palatine tonsil is also known as the fascial tonsil. And very commonly again has been asked, what is the lining epithelium of the palatine tonsil? Or if it is just asked, what is the lining epithelium of tonsil? Yes, it is understood what is asked is the palatine tonsil. What is the lining epithelium? Yes, that is the stratified squamous. In the laryngopharynx, that is the hypopharynx also, do we have any component of Walde's ring? No, we do not have any component of Walde's ring. Yes, but yes, the lining epithelium is, again, it is the stratified squamous. So here we have the pharyngeal wall. Yes, we have the lining epithelium. We have removed the lining epithelium. What you are seeing now is the components of the Walde's ring. The Walde's ring are sitting on, what is this? Yes, this is the fascia. So next, after the epithelium, after the subepithelial layer of the lymphoid tissue, which is the Walde's ring, yes, behind that we have this fascia, this blue thing that you are seeing. This is the fascia, and this fascia lines the muscle layer anteriorly. So I told you that the pharynx is a musculofacial tube. So it is actually a muscle which is bounded anteriorly and posteriorly by fascia, right? And definitely we will have the epithelial lining. Here additionally, to give immunity, we also have the subepithelial layer of lymphoid tissue. So this fascia which lines the muscle layer anteriorly, behind this are the muscles of the pharynx. So this fascia which lines the muscle layer anteriorly, this is the anterior fascia of the pharynx. So this is what is known as the pharyngobasilar fascia. Why I told you anterior fascia of the pharynx? It is anterior fascia of the pharynx, so you can remember its name starts with pharynx first. Yes, why? Because behind the muscle also we have another fascia. The muscle is bounded anteriorly and posteriorly by fascia. So the fascia that binds the muscle layer posteriorly, that is behind the muscle, so it is what is known as, its name starts with B for behind, B for buccopharyngeal fascia. The pharynx comes there later, buccopharyngeal fascia. Whereas here this is the anterior fascia of the pharynx, so the name starts from the pharynx, pharyngobasilar fascia. Is that very clear? Now here what we can see is that all these lymphoid tissue are sitting here on the pharyngobasilar fascia. Yes, and what is the significance of knowing this? That the tonsil, what we call normally whenever we say in layman terms, or otherwise also when we say tonsils and large, what tonsil are we talking about? We are talking about the palatine tonsils, these tonsils, yes. So at the level of the palatine tonsil, which is present in the oropharynx, in the lateral wall of the oropharynx, yes, now I have opened this so that you can see it. At the level of the palatine tonsils, this pharyngobasilar fascia is very thickened. It is very thickened. Just medial to the palatine tonsil, we have the pharyngobasilar fascia, and it is very thickened at the level of the palatine tonsil, and that pharyngobasilar fascia forms the capsule of the tonsil. So just note that this capsule of the tonsil is not a complete capsule. It is not covering here. Here it is only the epithelial lining. It is just present on the medial surface. So it is a hemicapsule. And again, both these questions are asked in your exam, that capsule of tonsil is formed by. Yes, so capsule is not a complete capsule covering the tonsil. It is just the thickening of the pharyngobasilar fascia on which the tonsil is sitting. Just next to the tonsil, this area is thickened in the pharyngobasilar fascia, and that is what we call as capsule of tonsil. It is very tightly adherent to the tonsil, known as capsule of tonsil. So yes, we need to know the next layer is the pharyngobasilar fascia, and lateral to the tonsil it forms the capsule. And is it a complete or hemicapsule? It is a hemicapsule. So just have a look at the tonsil here. Yes, this is the tonsil, and why is asked capsule of tonsil, hemicapsule? Yes, because tonsil is this tonsil, the palatine tonsil is something which we operate very, very commonly. So whenever we operate, whenever we remove the tonsil, we remove the tonsil along with the capsule. So it is asked that what is the capsule formed by? What exactly is this thickening? Why is it present only on one side? Why is it a hemicapsule? So now that solves all your queries, that this is just the pharyngobasilar fascia where it is sitting. That is the capsule of tonsil. So yes, here what we are seeing is the tonsil. Overlying it is the epithelial lining. Then we have the subepithelial layer of lymphoid tissue, that is here known as tonsil, and just lateral to that will be the capsule, that is the pharyngobasilar fascia. No doubts in that. Yes, you cannot mistake that. Now here from the pharyngeal wall, all these lymphoid tissues which are present here on the pharyngobasilar fascia, I have removed them. Okay. So what you are seeing here is the pharyngobasilar fascia. Yes, behind the pharyngobasilar fascia, when I remove the pharyngobasilar fascia, I will have the muscles of the pharynx, and the muscles of the pharynx are arranged in two layers. Yes. Now this is usually the layers of the pharynx you try to ratify. That is why I have just tried to show you, depict you, because it is so simple. There is nothing to get confused in all this at all, right? So just medial to the or just behind the pharyngobasilar fascia, which I just removed, there are two sets of muscles. Yes, what are these? These which you can see going longitudinally. Yes, the blue, the yellow. Yes, these are known as the longitudinal muscles of the pharynx, and behind them, this orange, that is the circular muscle. Is that clear? So we are first going to do the longitudinal muscles. So we have the three longitudinal muscles of the pharynx. They are going longitudinally, and they are not present all over everywhere. Like, yes, they are present in going longitudinally from above downwards, and they are present only like this. So what are their names? One is going from the eustachian tube. From the eustachian tube, it is arising and it is going down. So this is known as salpingopharyngeus. Yes, all the three longitudinal muscles have pharyngeus in their name. So it is known as salpingopharyngeus. Why? Because it is arising from the tube. Which tube? Eustachian tube. Salpings means tube. So it is from the nasopharynx, from the eustachian tube opening. You can see it on both the sides. You can see it on both the sides, the blue thing. So that is the salpingopharyngeus arising from the eustachian tube opening in the nasopharynx, and it is going down. Right, that is salpingopharyngeus. Now the next arises from the palate and then it goes down. So it arises from the palate and goes down. That is why I have shown it like this. That is what is, tell me the name, palatopharyngeus. Yes, that is the palatopharyngeus. And the third comes from the styloid to the pharynx. So styloid is outside, right? Styloid is outside. We'll just see that in some time. Styloid process is present outside here. From the mastoid, from medial to the mastoid, we have the styloid process. So to this is attached the muscle stylopharyngeus. So it is coming from the outside and going inside the pharynx. This is another, that is why I have shown it like this, coming from the outside into the pharynx, forming the longitudinal muscle of the pharynx. This is what is stylopharyngeus. Now this was just a small depiction for you to understand. Now let us see how they exactly look like. Let us first write down the longitudinal muscles, then let us see how they look like. So the longitudinal muscles are the three pharyngeus muscle. So one is the, yes, now you tell me, yes, the salpingopharyngeus. Salpingopharyngeus. Then we have the, yes, the palatopharyngeus. Palatopharyngeus. And the third is the stylopharyngeus. Stylopharyngeus, and they are named according to from where they are originating. Yes, so from the eustachian tube, so here we have the nose. So behind that, so from the eustachian tube area arises the salpingopharyngeus and it goes down, right? From the palate, below this we have the palate. So from the palate will arise the palatopharyngeus and it will go down. The palatopharyngeus, it actually forms the posterior pillar. Again, we'll see that in some time. So this goes down. Yes, and we have the stylopharyngeus. Yes, stylopharyngeus is coming from outside, from the styloid process, and it is coming down. So the upper attachment of all these is different according to which they are named so. Whereas a lower attachment, all of them, they go down and they attach below they attach, all of them, they attach to the thyroid. They attach to the thyroid below. Yes. And what is the significance? What's the significance of these longitudinal muscles? Yes, they have these origin and attachment you just saw. So when they contract, can you see? They contract like this. So when they contract like this, can you make out what is happening to the pharyngeal tube? It is dilating. Yes, so it is dilating. So the longitudinal muscles are also known as dilators. They are known as dilators. Dilators. And what is the significance that they are dilating? Why does the pharyngeal tube need to dilate? Yes, whenever we are eating, whenever we are swallowing something, the pharyngeal tube, to push the food down, has to dilate and has to constrict, right? So these constriction and the dilatation movement push the food down. So dilatation is by what? Dilatation is by the longitudinal muscles, whereas behind the longitudinal muscles, we have the circular muscles. These circular muscles are known as constrictors. Why they are known as constrictors? Because they are the one, when they contract, they constrict. Yes, so both of these help in pushing the food down in contraction of the pharynx. Now here, what view of the pharynx are you seeing here? Yes, we are seeing this complete pharyngeal tube. This complete musculofacial tube, which is intact, which is in the form of a tube. Whatever I was showing you through the nasopharynx or the oropharynx, I showed you the Walde's ring, I showed you the longitudinal muscles after I removed the pharyngobasilar fascia. Now what you're seeing is the look that you will get when you're standing from behind the pharynx. So the look of the pharynx, the complete pharyngeal wall that I am seeing is what is being shown here. So now let me do one thing. Let me cut open this pharyngeal wall. Okay, let me give an incision in the center and let me cut open so that I will be able to see the longitudinal and the circular muscles. So here when I cut open, so yes, this is the pharyngeal wall that was closed, that has been cut open, and what you're seeing now is, yes, you can see this part is the nasal cavity. So this was the part of the nasopharynx. This here is the oral cavity anteriorly that you can see. So this is the part of the oropharynx, this tube, yes, which has been opened now, and this is the larynx. So this part is the part of the laryngopharynx, right? So now to see the muscles, what I have done is I have cut the pharynx and one side I have kept closed, the other one I have opened, deflected, so that now you can see the muscles. And to see the muscles, I have removed the first two layers. What are the first two layers? Yes, the epithelium has been removed and the subepithelial lymphoid tissue has been removed, and also the pharyngobasilar fascia has been removed, right? So now what I am seeing is directly is the muscles. So the longitudinal muscles are these muscles that you can see here. Yes, can you see this? This is the eustachian tube. So from here comes down the muscle. This is, name it, quickly name it. Yes, salpingopharyngeus. From the palate comes down this muscle. What is this? Yes, palatopharyngeus. And from the styloid process is outside. So yes, here we can see this. This here is the styloid process, from which is coming this muscle, which is now entering the pharynx. It will enter the pharynx, from there it will go inside. Yes, it will come inside like this, and that is what is a stylopharyngeus. And all of them below, they come and they attach to the thyroid. So they help as being dilators. So now when I have showed you that simple paper model, and now when you see this, I'm sure that it is absolutely clear what these muscles are. And when things are very clear in your mind, you never forget it. You've seen it once and that is for life. And yes, don't forget to revise. Yes, that goes without saying. So quickly you're going to tell me what the longitudinal muscles of the pharynx are. Yes, what are the longitudinal muscles? Longitudinal muscles are the three pharynges: stylo, salpingo, and the palatopharyngeus. So surrounding the longitudinal muscles are the circular muscles. The three circular muscles I told you are known as constrictors. Why they are known as constrictors, I already told you. Yes, so these three circular muscles are arranged superiorly, middle and inferior. So they are named, so they are known as superior constrictor, middle constrictor and the inferior constrictor. So now let us have a look at the constrictor muscles. So yes, this is the longitudinal muscle layer. This is what is the longitudinal muscle layer, and behind that, can you see this? Yes, these are the circular muscles, and these are in three layers. There are three circular muscles: the superior constrictor, then we have the middle constrictor, and then we have the inferior constrictor. And when you see this picture, you must be feeling that yes, this tube, the pharyngeal tube, the pharynx that we are talking about, the pharynx is a tube, I told you, right? So this pharynx, which is a tube, is a compactly closed tube, which is closely, very tightly, completely covered by muscles like that, right? When you're seeing it like this. It is completely covered only posteriorly, where the constrictor muscles overlap each other. Whereas, just see laterally. Can you see laterally? Yes, laterally it is not covering as it was covering posteriorly. Can you see there are gaps here? One gap, two gap. Yes. So why are these gaps here? Because laterally these constrictor muscles do not overlap each other. All the constrictor muscles, they have different site of origin anteriorly. Posteriorly, all of them, they go behind and they attach to the midline fibrous raphe, right? In the center is a fibrous raphe, is a midline fibrous raphe, midline fibrous raphe. So they overlap each other, whereas anteriorly the sites of origin are different. Yes, the sites of origin of these muscles, you must have read in anatomy. Yes, and definitely we are not going to do each and of everything, but yes, I will give you a glimpse of it, that the site of origin of the superior constrictor is from where? Yes, superior constrictor arises from the pterygoid. That is just for you to remember this, right? So it arises from the pterygoid. Yes, from the pterygoid. Yes, from the pterygoid. Pterygoid we have heard, no? Pterygoid plates behind the maxilla. Yes, so it arises from the pterygoid, and from the pterygoid till the mandible is a raphe, that is known as pterygomandibular raphe, and so it has some attachment to the mandible also. So the middle constrictor should now start from the mandible. Yes or no? Superior constrictor has ended at the mandible. But the middle constrictor does not start from the mandible. It starts from where? From the hyoid. So the origin of the middle constrictor muscle is from the hyoid, which means that in between these two, automatically there is going to be a gap. There is going to be a gap. Yes. And also the middle constrictor starts from where? It originates from the hyoid. So the inferior constrictor should start from the hyoid and go down. No. The inferior constrictor does not start from the hyoid. The inferior constrictor starts from the thyroid. Can you see here? It starts from the thyroid, which means again in between these two there is a gap. There is a gap. Yes. So yes, laterally there are gaps between these muscles, and these gaps are important. Why? Because these gaps are the entry sites for vessels and nerves that supply the pharynx. And what are the vessels and nerves that supply, from where they enter into the pharynx, is a very, very important question of your exam. So before we see that, you are quickly going to tell me, I told you exactly from where the muscles are originating and how they are inserting into the midline fibrous raphe. So you are going to quickly tell me what will be the circular muscle at the level of the tonsil. That is the only part that we are interested in, because that is the circular muscle that we will come in contact with very, very repeatedly whenever we are operating on the tonsil. It is asked very commonly, what is the circular muscle on which the tonsil is sitting? Yes, which is the circular muscle which you will encounter while you are operating the tonsil? Which is the circular muscle in the bed of tonsil? So can you tell me that? Okay, so before that, just ease out. Tell me, what is the circular muscle at the level of the nasopharynx? Yes, let us start from above. At the level of the nasopharynx, which is the circular muscle? Superior constrictor. That was simple. Yes, that is the uppermost constrictor muscle. Very good. Now at the level of the oropharynx, what is the circular muscle? Oropharynx is the tonsil. Which is the circular muscle there? Did I hear middle constrictor? No, not middle constrictor. Let us have a look again at that picture. Yes, see here again. Yes, what we are seeing here is that this is the oral cavity. This is the oral cavity here. Behind this is the oropharynx. Yes, in the oropharynx, we have the tonsil. Yes or no? Yes, so at the level of the tonsil, we have which constrictor? We have the superior constrictor. Is that clear? The superior constrictor goes down till the mandible. Till the mandible. So lateral to the tonsil, we have which constrictor? We have the superior constrictor. Never forget that. Yes, where many questions are asked on this, we have the superior constrictor. The middle constrictor starts from where? From the hyoid here. Is that clear? It is from the hyoid. So now quickly tell me, what are the three constrictor muscles of the pharynx? Okay, before that, tell me the longitudinal muscles of the pharynx. Quickly tell me. Yes, what you have read, it should be on your tips till now. Yes, the longitudinal muscles are the three pharyngeus muscle. It is your revision. You have to tell me. Yes, which three pharyngeus muscle? Stylo, salpingo and palatopharyngeus. Behind that, we have the three circular muscles. The three circular muscles are superior, middle and inferior constrictor. Good. Okay. So now the pharynx starts at the level of the base of skull. Yes or no? It goes down till the level of the cricoid, the lower border of cricoid. It starts above at the base of skull. Yes or no? Yes. The uppermost constrictor muscle of the pharynx is superior constrictor. Now just tell me this statement is true or false. The upper border of superior constrictor muscle is attached to the base of skull. Yes or no? That seems so true, no? It is not. Yes, the upper border of superior constrictor muscle is not attached to the base of skull. It is free. Yes, it is free. Just see here. Just see here. The upper border of superior constrictor muscle is free. It arises from these sides that I told you. And posteriorly, when it goes to attach to the midline fibrous raphe, just see here. It attaches in the midline here at this tubercle. And the upper border, the rest of the upper border is free. It is not attached to the base of skull. This here is the level of the base of skull. This is the base of skull. It is not attached to the base of skull, which means that in between, yes, just see here, in between the base of skull here, base of skull and the upper border of superior constrictor is a gap. And this gap is what is known as a sinus of Morgagni. So yes, the upper border of superior constrictor, it is free, and this is what is known as, the gap is what is known as sinus of Morgagni. Sinus of Morgagni. And what is the significance of the sinus of Morgagni? Yes, it is the entry site of certain structures. And what are these structures that we need to know? That is the normal function, but there can be some abnormality, clinical significance of the sinus of Morgagni. Whenever there is any carcinoma of the nasopharynx, it can, if it goes carcinoma of nasopharynx, we know that nasopharynx is, yes, the circular muscle at the nasopharynx is the superior constrictor. So whenever a carcinoma of the nasopharynx goes posteriorly and it goes superiorly, that is a very easy pathway for the carcinoma of the nasopharynx to go to the base of skull, to go out from the base of skull. Yes, and this, when it involves the sinus of Morgagni, that is what is known as sinus of Morgagni syndrome in carcinoma of the nasopharynx. What that syndrome is, we'll see that later on. But when I tell you that patient is a nasopharyngeal carcinoma, is having a sinus of Morgagni syndrome, so that time just don't rectify that, okay, sinus of Morgagni syndrome, because that syndrome will be involvement of all the structures that are actually passing through the sinus of Morgagni. So if you know this, you know that. So what are the structures that pass through the sinus of Morgagni? How will you remember that? Yes, the structures that pass through that is, we have seen this picture earlier. Yes, so here we have the superior constrictor muscle, the upper border of superior constrictor, and here is the base of skull. So yes, it is free. It is not attached to the base of skull, which means that in this part of the base of skull, this gap, which is the sinus of Morgagni, has no muscle. It just has the epithelial lining and the fascia. Which fascia? Anterior fascia. Yes, and the posterior fascia. What is that? It is just filled with the fascia. There is no muscle here. So upper border superior constrictor muscle is free. And what are the structures that are passing through here? Can you see this? Can you make out what this is? Yes, this is the eustachian tube. The eustachian tube comes from the ear. It comes into the pharynx. Yes, it opens into the pharynx. So it enters the pharynx, nasopharynx, from where? Through the sinus of Morgagni. So along with that are the muscles of the eustachian tube. You can just remember it like this, or you can remember it by the mnemonic thala. The structures that pass through the foramen of Morgagni is thala. T-A-A-L-A. What is thala? T is, yes, now that I have told you that it is eustachian tube along with the muscles of the eustachian tube, you know the answer. Yes, what is T? T is tensor palati. A is the auditory tube. Along with that, we have another A, and that is the ascending palatine artery. Ascending palatine artery, this is a branch of facial. So we have the auditory tube, eustachian tube, along with the nerve supply, along with the arterial supply, along with the muscles. Yes. L is what? L is another muscle. What is that? That is the levator palati. These are the two muscles of the eustachian tube also. They are the muscles of the palate, but they are also acting on the eustachian tube. The tensor palati, very, very important for opening the eustachian tube. Yes. So this is levator palati. So that is why with movements of the palate, the eustachian tube also opens. So whenever you are ascending or descending in the flight, yes, for equalization of the pressure of the middle ear, we need the eustachian tube to open. So that is why they tell you that always keep chewing something or swallowing something. Yes, so when you chew, the palate also moves. So that leads to movement of these muscles, the tensor palati, the levator palati, and that leads to, mainly it is the tensor palati that is responsible for opening of the tube. So along with the tube, we have these muscles, the tensor palati, levator palati, and we have another A, and that is the ascending pharyngeal artery, the palatine branch. Okay, so we have thala. What is thala? We have the tensor palati, ascending palatine artery, ascending pharyngeal artery, and we have levator palati and the auditory tube. So now we know that the upper border of superior constrictor muscle is not attached to the base of skull. So there is a gap there also. Is there a gap in between the superior and the middle constrictor? Yes, there is a gap between the superior and middle constrictor. And is this present posteriorly or is it present laterally? Yes, it is present laterally. Yes, in between the middle and inferior constrictor also, is there a gap laterally? Yes, there is a gap. We just saw that some time back. And these are for entry of the vessels and nerves, I told you. And let us now see what are the nerves that enter the pharynx. Why will the nerves enter the pharynx? To supply it. So what are the nerves that supply the pharynx? Yes, we have the 9th and the 10th nerve. Okay, so here we have the 9th and the 10th nerve, they exit the cranium from where? Yes, from the jugular foramen, the 9th, 10th, 11th. Jugular foramen is, yes, somewhere in the floor of the petrous bone. So we have the ear here. Below that, we have the jugular foramen. Yes, so from the jugular foramen is coming out the nerves. Which nerves? The 9th nerve, and we have the 10th nerve, right? So the 9th and the 10th are the ones that give branches to the pharynx. So here we know that the nerves that supply the pharynx are the two nerves. Which two nerves? The 9th nerve and we have the 10th nerve, right? Now the 10th nerve again divides into two. Yes, the 10th nerve has a superior branch, that is the superior laryngeal. 10th nerve is the vagus, that is the main nerve of the larynx. So the branches are named according to the larynx: superior laryngeal, and that supplies the superior part of the larynx, and the recurrent laryngeal that supplies the inferior part. Okay, so superior laryngeal and we have the recurrent laryngeal. Now the superior laryngeal again divides into two. There is a external laryngeal and internal laryngeal. The internal laryngeal, as the name, will enter the pharynx, and we have the external laryngeal that remains externally only. So overall, what do we know? That which nerve supply the pharynx? Yes, we have the 9th and the 10th. Yes, which branches of the 10th? Yes, from the superior laryngeal, we have only the internal laryngeal that is going inside the pharynx to supply it. And we have the recurrent laryngeal. Is that clear? So how many nerves entering the pharynx? 3 nerves. Which 3 nerves? 9th, internal laryngeal and recurrent laryngeal, and they enter in the same order of the order of where the gaps are present. So the upper gap is in between the superior and the middle constrictor. Through that will enter which one? Through that will enter the 9th nerve. So the 9th nerve will enter through this gap, which is in between the superior constrictor. We have the middle constrictor. We know that superior constrictor is attached, lowermost attachment is at the mandible. Middle constrictor, yes, it arises at the level of the hyoid, and the inferior constrictor, this here is the inferior constrictor, that is at the level of the thyroid and the cricoid. Yes, so here we have the first gap in between the superior and the middle constrictor. Through that will enter the 9th nerve. Yes, that is the uppermost. So that will enter through the upper gap. The next now to enter into the pharynx is the superior laryngeal branch. Which branch? Internal branch. So this internal branch will enter through the second gap. And what is the second gap? Yes, the second gap is in between the middle and the inferior constrictor, right? And the third nerve that will enter is the recurrent laryngeal. Recurrent laryngeal will enter in between the inferior constrictor and the esophagus. Is that clear? Now this is very, very commonly asked. And how do you remember this? You can remember it like this, that the uppermost, that is the 9th, 9 definitely has to be upper than the 10th, yes. So 9th will enter the upper gap, that is in between superior and middle constrictor. And 10th, 2 branches will enter, next the superior branch, next, and then the recurrent branch. Or a easier method is when it is suddenly asked in your exam that and it was a question that was asked recently, that the internal laryngeal enters the larynx in between which two muscles? It enters, you can call it just behind the larynx is the hypopharynx. So it enters the larynx and then it goes into the hypopharynx. So it enters the larynx in between which two muscles? In between which two muscles? Yes. So immediately to remember, how you can remember is that the muscle of the larynx at the level of the larynx or at the level of the hypopharynx is which muscle? Superior, middle or inferior constrictor? Inferior constrictor. Inferior constrictor is attached to the thyroid. So the inferior constrictor is the muscle at the level of the larynx. Yes. The nerves of the larynx are named laryngeal. They are the superior laryngeal and the recurrent laryngeal. Yes. So the superior laryngeal branch will enter at the upper border of inferior constrictor. The recurrent laryngeal branch will enter at the lower border of inferior constrictor. Is that clear? That is how you can remember. So if somebody immediately asks you, what is the nerve that enters in between the inferior constrictor and the esophagus? So what you have to think? Inferior constrictor and esophagus, that is the lower border of inferior constrictor. So that has to be which nerve? The lower part of this is a muscle of the larynx at the level of the larynx. It is not a muscle of the larynx. It is a muscle at the level of the larynx. So yes, the inferior branch of vagus, that is recurrent laryngeal. If immediately somebody asks you that what is the nerve that enters in between the middle and inferior constrictor, immediately what should come to your mind? Which border of inferior constrictor that is? Upper border. Superior border is superior laryngeal. Which branch? Internal branch. Is that clear? So however you remember, what you have to remember is that what you need to know is that you cannot forget this. You have to remember this. This is very, very frequently asked. So now quickly let us write this down. Yes, and now this is going to be your revision. You will tell me before I write down. Yes, so base of skull and superior constrictor, what is that area known as? Yes, that is sinus of Morgagni. And what are the structures that pass through the sinus of Morgagni? Tell me quickly. Yes, that is your revision. Yes, yes, Tala, T-A-L-A. Yes, tensor palati, auditory tube, ascending palatine artery, levator palati, ascending pharyngeal artery. Superior and middle constrictor, yes, that is the upper gap. So the ninth nerve. And the muscle, yes, in between the superior and middle constrictor also enters some muscle. You know that, but yes, maybe, yes, this is the styloid process here. From the styloid process comes the muscle, the longitudinal muscle, stylopharyngeus. I told you it is coming from the styloid outside and then entering into the pharynx like the longitudinal muscle. So yes, this is entering into the pharynx where? In between these two gaps, between the superior and the middle constrictor. So this is the stylopharyngeus muscle enters along with the ninth nerve, the stylopharyngeus muscle, and yes, the stylopharyngeus muscle is the only muscle of the pharynx that is supplied by the ninth nerve. Otherwise, the motor nerve supply of the pharynx is the 10th nerve. Is that clear? So both these are together. Can you see both these are together? So why the nerve supply should come from the 10th? 9th only supplies it. Yes, so this is the only motor nerve supply of the 9th, in fact. That is the stylopharyngeus. So in between the middle and inferior constrictor, that's the superior border of inferior constrictor. However you can remember it, that is the internal laryngeal. In between the inferior constrictor and the esophagus, that is the lower border of inferior constrictor. Yes, that is which nerve? Yes, the recurrent laryngeal nerve. Yes, so this here at the upper border is the internal laryngeal nerve and at the lower border is the recurrent laryngeal nerve. Now the inferior constrictor muscle is in two parts. It arises not only from the thyroid, it also arises from the cricoid. So the part that arises from the thyroid, this part, this is what is known as the thyropharyngeus. Whereas the one that arises from the cricoid, this is known as cricopharyngeus. Yes, so this is what is known as thyropharyngeus, and this is known as cricopharyngeus, and this thyropharyngeus and cricopharyngeus, the thyropharyngeus goes obliquely, it rises from the thyroid and it goes obliquely posteriorly to attach to the midline fibrous raphe, whereas cricopharyngeus, it goes horizontally behind. So can you see this gap? This gap in between the thyroid and the cricopharyngeus? Yes, this is a very, very important area of the pharynx. This gap is what is known as the Killian's dehiscence. Now quickly let us see what this Killian's dehiscence, where it is. So yes, we are seeing here that the thyropharyngeus from the thyroid anteriorly, it is going to the midline fibrous raphe posteriorly and the cricopharyngeus is going horizontally. So this gap that is produced in between the thyroid and the cricopharyngeus part of inferior constrictor Is it a posterior gap or lateral gap? Yes, it is a posterior gap. So this is what is known as the Killian's dehiscence, or this is also known as the gateway of tears or tears. Tears or tears. This is known as gateway of tears. Why tears? Because this is the most common site of pharyngeal pouch formation. Pharyngeal pouch formation. Yes, what is pharyngeal pouch? What is pharyngeal pouch? Pharyngeal pouch is that the pharynx has pouched outside like a pouch. It has come out. The pharynx has come out like a pouch. Yes, this is pharyngeal pouch. So this is the most common site of pharyngeal pouch. Why should the pharynx come out like a pouch? Yes, what do you think? The hypopharynx, below the hypopharynx we have the esophagus, we know that, right? What do you think, this junction between the hypopharynx and the esophagus, is it closed or is it open all the time? It is closed all the time. Why is it closed? Yes, it is closed, and that is what you call as upper esophageal sphincter. That is formed by this muscle, the succular muscle, the cricopharyngeal, which is known as cricopharyngeal sphincter or the upper esophageal sphincter. Why is it closed? If it was open, then all the time that we are breathing in the air, along with going into the larynx, will also go into the esophagus. That will lead to so much of bloating in the stomach, right? So it is closed. It opens when? Only when the pharyngeal muscles contract. Yes, with the help of the dilators and the constrictors, when they contract to push the food down. So when they contract to push the food down, with this contractile movements, the upper esophageal muscle, it opens and the food goes down, right? Now, if the activity, the sympathetic activity of the upper esophageal sphincter is very high, what happens is that when the muscles are contracting about to push the food down, it fails to open. It is not opening only. So now what will happen is all the pressure will be applied to the pharyngeal, through the pharyngeal walls above the cricopharyngeal sphincter, above the upper esophageal sphincter, that is at the level of the cricopharynx. So above the cricopharynx, there is so much of high pressure because all these muscles are trying to contract to push the food down, and the cricopharyngeal sphincter is not opening. So what will happen now is when the pressure is on the walls will start outpouching. And yes, just above the cricopharyngeal sphincter, we have an area where it can very easily outpouch. Why? Because there is a gap there. What is that gap? That gap is what is known as Killian's dehiscence, also known as gateway of tears. So this is a posterior gap, which means that this pouch that rises from here will be a posterior pouch. Yes or no? Yes. So this pouch is what is known as Zenker's diverticulum. This is what is known as Zenker's diverticulum. This, and what we have to know is that this Killian's dehiscence or the gateway of tears is the most common site of pharyngeal pouch formation. Are there others? Most common means there must be others also, no? Yes, we have so many lateral gaps also. We saw that now in between superior middle constrictor, middle inferior constrictor. Laterally also there are gaps. So laterally also the pharynx can pouch. But most common site is in between the thyroid and the cricopharyngeus part of inferior constrictor, that is just above the sphincter, the pressure will be maximum. And here the gap is so much. So here this is the most common site of pharyngeal pouch formation. And the pharyngeal pouch that forms from here is what is known as Zenker's diverticulum. The Zenker's diverticulum is, answer this, is it a pulsion diverticulum or a traction diverticulum? Pulsion or a traction? Pulsion means that the pressure has pushed it out, or traction means that something from outside has pulled it. This is a pulsion diverticulum. So yes, this is a pulsion diverticulum. Pulsion diverticulum. Okay, is it a true diverticulum or a false diverticulum? What's the meaning of true and false? True diverticulum means it is outpouching which contains all the layers of the pharynx, pharyngeal wall. So this is a false diverticulum. Why? Because this contains only the mucosa and the pharyngobasilar fascia. What is not present here? Yes, the muscle layer is missing. It is in between the two layers of the muscle. The muscle is missing here. So this is a false diverticulum. This is a false diverticulum. And is it a posterior gap or is it a lateral gap? This is a posterior gap. This Killian's dehiscence is a posterior gap, which means that on which of your barium swallow will you see this pouch best? See, if it is a posterior gap, this pouch, when it starts, initially, to recognize it early, you will have to, if it is coming out like this, you will have to get a lateral view done. Whereas if it was a lateral pouch, then you will see it better on which view? On AP view. So this is a what pouch? Yes, this is a posterior gap. So initially, even when this pouch is very small, you can visualize it on barium swallow. On which view? But which view you will have to ask for? Yes, the lateral view. Again, that was a question of your exam. It is viewed on which view? On the lateral view. So on lateral view of barium swallow, you will see it. Yes. Okay, so which means if there is a patient who has come to you with a complaint of a swelling here, we can see the swelling here in the neck. Can this be a pharyngeal pouch? We can see that this is a somewhat a lateral swelling. Can this be a pharyngeal pouch? Yes or no? What do you think? This is a posterior gap. This pouch rises posteriorly. Yes, it rises posteriorly. But posteriorly, how much space do we have? Posteriorly, we have the vertebrae. So when this pouch enlarges, it comes on the neck. It comes laterally in the neck. Most commonly on the left side because of the left side curvature of the esophagus in this part of the neck. So yes, it can present as a swelling like this. So this is actually a posterolateral pouch. Okay, so now just see what I am telling. What I am telling you is that this is a posterior gap. Okay, Killian's dehiscence. Killian's dehiscence is a posterior gap. But Zenker's diverticulum is not only a posterior diverticulum. This is a posterolateral diverticulum. Is that clear? It is a posterolateral diverticulum. So if this patient has presented to you with this complaint of the swelling here, how do you know that this swelling can be a pharyngeal pouch or this swelling is a pharyngeal pouch? What extra history will the patient be telling you which will make you think that this can be pharyngeal pouch? So now let us see what is happening in this pouch. Yes, whenever the patient is eating now, because of the additional pouch, the food is not going only in the esophagus where it should go. Yes, it is going into this pouch also. And this pouch, when it is going, what will happen? It will get on going on. It will collect it there. It will get on getting collected there. So if it collects there, what all will it lead to? It will lead to a very foul breath. That is what is known as halitosis. It will lead to halitosis. Also, when the food is collected here, whenever the patient lies down or otherwise also, the food might get regurgitated, and when the patient lies down, then this regurgitation will be high. So there will be a lot of regurgitation of food, and this regurgitation of food, where will it go? Yes, just adhere to it. Here we have the larynx, right? So it will go into the larynx. It will lead to recurrent laryngitis. It will lead to recurrent hoarseness. It can go into the lungs, leading to recurrent pneumonias. It can lead to lung complications, lung abscesses. So it can lead to all these complications. There can be halitosis. There can be regurgitation of food. Regurgitation of food. Okay, just tell me, regurgitation of food. It's such a common problem, no? How do we know that we are not having the pouch from which the food is getting regurgitated? When it is coming from the stomach and not from the pouch? Whenever it is coming from the pouch, it will be totally undigested food. Yes, so it will be an undigested food when it is from the pouch. From the stomach, it is mixed with acids, yes, and it is a literal digested form of the food. So here the regurgitation of which food? Of undigested food. Yes, also what the patient will have is recurrent hoarseness, laryngitis, pneumonias, and all this will be recurrent pneumonias, lung complications. And also just see here, when this pouch has enlarged so much, can you see that this is now also compressing the esophagus? So when it compresses the esophagus, patient will have dysphagia. So there will be then dysphagia. Right? So this patient would have come with these complaints also, or maybe when the patient has come with the swelling, when you ask this history, yes, all this will be present in the patient. And now when you are seeing this patient here with this swelling here, how can you palpate this swelling and know that yes, this is pharyngeal pouch? Yes, on palpation, when you palpate it, there will be a gurgling sound. So there will be a gurgling sound, and this gurgling sound is what is known as Boyce sign. This is what is known as the Boyce sign. And when I was once teaching this somewhere, and when I told this, I saw that the student who was sitting on the first seat, I saw tears rolling down. I asked, my God, what have I said something hurting? Have I said something wrong? What happened? And she said that, ma'am, whenever I swallow, I have this gurgling sound. So should I get a barium swallow, lateral view done tomorrow? Am I having a pharyngeal pouch? What do you think? Is she having or is she not having? This is present in elderly. This is neuromuscular incoordination that happens in elderly. Yes. So yes, that is a natural tendency that we feel that we have everything, every disease that we study, we feel we have that, but no, it is not. Yes, so this is present in, what is the age? It is present in elderly. And yes, we can confirm it by an endoscopic examination, and just see here on endoscopy. Can you see the esophageal endoscopy showing two lumen? Yes, this lumen and this. Yes, you can also see the lower border. So we know that this is the pouch, this is the pouch, and this is the esophageal cavity. And can you see this bar? Yes, what is this bar? This is the bar of the muscle. Yes, above which this is the sphincter muscle, above which is the gap, from above which is this pouch, outpouching. Yes, so what is this? Yes, this is the cricopharyngeal. This is the cricopharyngeal bar. This is the cricopharyngeal sphincter. Yes, we saw that here, that it pouches above the cricopharyngeal sphincter, right? So that bar that we are seeing, and in between the two openings, the two cavities, that is the cricopharyngeal sphincter, which means that if it is asked that cricopharyngeal myotomy should be done in pharyngeal pouch. Okay, don't get confused what is cricopharyngeus and why we are cutting it. What is the management? We'll see that in some time. I'm just telling you this because later on when I tell, don't get confused, where is cricopharyngeus here? Also, the best investigation here will be a barium swallow. That will exactly show you how much it is. So it will be the barium swallow, lateral view, will show you how big the pouch is. Yes, so you have confirmed that this is a patient of pharyngeal pouch by the history that the patient was giving. What history the patient was giving? Tell me quickly. Halitosis, regurgitation of what food? Undigested food, recurrent hoarseness, laryngitis, dysphagia. Yes, and there can be lung complications. Along with that, there is a swelling here. Might be present, might not be present. If present, how do you know? Gurgling sound. What is that known as? Boyce sign. Yes. So you did endoscopy, you did barium swallow, you have confirmed that this is the patient of pharyngeal pouch. How do you manage it? So for management, what we can do is either an internal approach or external approach. What is external approach? Is that you do a open neck surgery. You open the neck and this pouch, the out pouch, just cut it, excise it, right? That is the open neck surgery. That is external approach. Whereas what we have seen is that these patients are usually elderly, yes or no. So doing an open neck surgery would not be a very good option. And we have much better options. And what is that? That is the internal endoscopic surgery. What endoscopic surgery? What will we do in endoscopic surgery? What is happening here? Just see in this picture. What is happening here is that above the cricopharyngeal sphincter, this outpouching has occurred from the Killian's dehiscence area. So what we will do is that through the endoscope, what we can do is we can remove this bar, which is the common wall between these two. If we remove, what will happen? It will become a common area. It will become a common cavity. Like here we have removed this bar. So now the esophagus and this pouch is a common cavity. So there is no separate cavity where the food will go and collect, will lead to regurgitation, will lead to all these symptoms. So this cutting off the common bar, which means cutting off the cricopharyngeal muscle, cricopharyngeal myotomy can be done endoscopically either with a knife or you can do it with laser. Yes. So when we do it with laser, the first time this was done was with the help of diathermy, and that was done by Dollmann. So diathermic excision or laser excision is still known as Dollmann's procedure. It is known as Dollmann's procedure. That is a diathermy. That is Dollmann's procedure. And the laser that is used here is a carbon dioxide laser. You can see it here. Yes, that it gets burnt and then it heals. Definitely the patient is kept on Ryle's tube feeding till it heals completely. And if we are going to cut it with knife, can you imagine in this patient, just see here that these are the two edges. These are the two edges. This is one edge and this is the other edge. Here we have burnt it, so this is cut and coagulated at the same time. You don't need to stitch anything, and anyway it is in the esophagus down. How are you going to stitch there? Yes, this is endoscopic surgery. Now if we cut it with a knife, these two edges will be raw. So we will have to suture them here. We will have to suture it. We have cut in between. These two areas will be raw. We will have to suture it. So how will we suture it? So if we are cutting it with a knife, then what we use is a device which is known as stapling device. As it cuts, it staples the edges also, so that you don't have to suture. You anyway cannot suture that down. So you don't have to suture it. The edges get stapled. So that is what is known as stapling diverticulectomy. So when do we go for laser excision? When do we go for stapling thing? Yes, stapling diverticulectomy. That depends upon the size of the pouch. Now if it is a very small pouch, if it is less than 2 centimeters pouch, if it is very small pouch, then sometimes even a balloon dilatation of the cricopharyngeal sphincter to decrease its sympathetic activity also works. So if it is a very small pouch, then a balloon dilatation will work. Or also what you can go for is a laser excision. Now for larger pouches, why laser excision is not preferred is because laser it is a beam. It is a beam that you actually have to focus it on a particular area, and the area that you focus it on, that area gets cut as well as coagulated. It gets burnt, right? So if it is a deeper pouch, then laser excision might not be very safe. Then you go for stapling diverticulectomy. Stapling diverticulectomy. And if it is more than 4 centimeters, then definitely you can go either for stapling diverticulectomy, or you can go for excision, that is external excision. External excision. If you cut so much of the esophageal wall, so then that might be a problem. So just go and do an open surgery and excise it. Now some books differ in the approach to these diverticulums, but this is what we follow. This is what our textbooks of ENT follow, and that is what I have told you. And this sounds also very sensible to me, that yes, whenever we are dealing with a deeper pouch, then laser might not be very safe. So stapling diverticulectomy is a much safer option. So that is what we need to know in the muscular layer, right? So in the muscle layer, we have the longitudinal muscle, surrounding which we have the circular muscles. The circular muscles, quickly tell me what the circular muscles are. Superior, middle, inferior constrictor. Is the upper border superior constrictor muscle free? Yes or no? Yes, it is free. What is the gap in between the base of skull and upper border superior constrictor known as? Sinus of Morgagni. Yes. In between the middle and inferior constrictor, is there a gap? Yes, in middle and inferior constrictor, there is a gap. Laterally or posteriorly? Yes, that is a lateral gap. And what is the nerve that enters in between middle and inferior constrictor? Is the upper border of inferior constrictor. So that is upper branch of vagus. That is the superior laryngeal branch, internal laryngeal nerve. Okay, so in between the thyroid and the cricopharyngeus part of inferior constrictor, what is that gap known as? Yes, that is the Killian's dehiscence. And what is the diverticulum that arises from there known as? That is the Zenker's diverticulum. So we have seen up till the mesial everything that is important. What is the clinical significance? What we are doing is not only the anatomy but the clinical anatomy. So we know up till the clinical significance of the epithelial lining, of the Waldear's ring, the epithelial layer, the fascia, the muscles. Yes. Now behind the muscle is another fascia. So the fascia lines the muscles, the longitudinal as well as circular muscles, anteriorly as well as posteriorly. Quickly tell me, which is the anterior fascia of the pharynx? Name starts with pharynx. Yes, that is pharyngobasilar fascia. And behind the muscle layer is another fascia that is known as, B for behind, B for buccopharyngeal fascia. So behind the muscle layer, we have the buccopharyngeal fascia. This is behind the muscle. Behind the muscle. So now let us quickly write down in order the layers of the pharyngeal wall, and of course without doubt you are going to tell me and I'm going to write from inside out. We are going from the pharynx inside to the outside. Yes, first tell me what do we have first? Yes, we have the epithelial lining. We have the epithelial lining. Adenoids are lined by ciliated columnar. Tonsils are lined by stratified squamous. Soft palate by both. Okay. After that, second we have, below that we have subepithelial layer of lymphoid tissue. What is that? That is a Walde's ring. Walde's ring. Yes, in the oropharynx, what is the Walde's ring? Oropharynx. Walde's ring is the palatine tonsil. We have the lingual tonsils. Yes, very good. Okay, after that we have, behind that we have the Walde's ring is sitting on, yes, the fascia. Which fascia is that? That is the pharyngobasilar fascia. Pharyngobasilar fascia. Pharyngobasilar fascia forms anything in the tonsil? Yes, it forms a capsule of tonsil. It is a hemicapsule or complete capsule? It is a hemicapsule. Behind that we have muscle layer. Which muscle? Longitudinal or circular? Yes, we have the longitudinal muscle. The longitudinal muscle. Tell me what are the longitudinal muscles? Longitudinal are the three pharynges. Which three pharynges? Yes, from the stylopharynges, salpingopharynges and palatopharynges. Stylo, salpingo and palatopharynges. And below they are attached to the thyroid. They are constrictors or dilators? They are dilators. Okay. And behind that we have the circular muscles. How many circular muscles we have? We have the circular muscles. We have the circular muscles. Circular muscles, how many layers we have? Yes, the three layers. Which three layers? Superior, middle and inferior constrictor. Where is the foramen of Morgagni or the sinus of Morgagni present? We have one foramen of Morgagni in the diaphragm also, no? Yes, this is the sinus of Morgagni or the foramen of Morgagni of the pharynx. Yes, so this is at the level of the base of skull. Upper part of the superior constrictor muscle is free, yes or no? Yes. What are the two parts of the inferior constrictor? Thyropharyngeus and cricopharyngeus. What is the most common site of pharyngeal pouch formation? Killian's dehiscence is also known as gateway of tears. Is the site for origin of which diverticulum? Zenker's diverticulum. Zenker's diverticulum is a posterior pouch or a lateral pouch or a posterolateral pouch. It's a posterolateral pouch. If there's swelling here, how do we know that this is pharyngeal pouch? Gurgling sound. What is that known as? Boy's sign. The recurrent laryngeal nerve enters the pharynx in between. Recurrent laryngeal is the inferior branch. So, at the lower border of inferior constrictor. Glossopharyngeal nerve enters in between. Glossopharyngeal nerve in between the superior and the middle constrictor along with the muscle. Stylopharyngeus, yes. When we do the nerve supply, we'll do all the motor as well as sensory nerve supply together. But yes, now I'm telling it to you because they're lying together that the stylopharyngeus is supplied by the glossopharyngeal nerve. I have already told you that earlier, right? Which is the fascia that lines the muscle layer posteriorly. So after the circular muscle, we have which fascia? We have the buccopharyngeal fascia. Buccopharyngeal fascia. At the buccopharyngeal fascia, the pharyngeal wall ends. Yes, so you have a complete picture of all the layers of pharyngeal wall. As you go on removing the pharyngeal wall, do you see what exactly the pharyngeal wall is and what the significance is? Yes, very good.